Let me ask you a question. What if you have been working incredibly hard to solve a problem that isn't actually your problem? Think about it. You could spend months trying to become more disciplined when what you actually need is clarity. You keep improving your time management when the real issue is that your priorities are competing. You keep trying to motivate yourself when you are actually emotionally exhausted. You keep working on your communication when your real problem is that you're afraid to have the conversation. And this is where highly capable people get into trouble. Because when you're intelligent, resourceful, and accustomed to solving problems, your instinct is usually, give me the problem, I'll fix it. But there's a danger in being a good problem solver. You become very efficient at solving the wrong problem. And sometimes, the better your solution is, the longer it takes you to discover that you are solving the wrong thing. Think about going to a doctor with a persistent headache. Imagine the doctor simply gives you stronger pain medication every time you complain. The headache disappears temporarily, but the cause remains. You haven't solved the problem. You've managed the symptom. And I see the same thing happening in personal growth all the time. People treat the visible behavior while the real issue remains underneath. Today, I want to show you how to recognize when you're solving the wrong problem, with why high capacity people are especially vulnerable to this trap, and how to move from symptom management to root level recalibration. Because sometimes your breakthrough isn't another solution. It is not. It is asking a better question. Let's start with one important distinction. The problem you can see isn't necessarily the problem creating what you see. Consider procrastination. You might say, I have a procrastination problem. So you download a productivity app. You create a schedule. You set deadlines. Use accountability. And for a while, it works. And then the pattern returns. Why? Because perhaps procrastination wasn't the real problem. Maybe you are afraid of being judged. Maybe the task represented a level of visibility you weren't emotionally prepared for. Maybe you were unclear about what you actually wanted. Maybe you were exhausted. Maybe the goal wasn't truly yours. The behavior was real, but the cause was somewhere else. Or consider indecision. You might assume, I need to become better at making decisions. So you gather more information, more research, more opinions, more pros and cons. But eventually, you have 20 tabs open and still don't know what to do. Maybe you don't have an information problem. Maybe you have an alignment problem. Because when your values, priorities, emotions, and identity are pulling in different directions, more information can actually make the decision harder. You don't need more data. You don't. You need greater internal agreement. That is what you need. That is why I often tell my clients, don't ask only what is happening. Ask what is producing what is happening. That second question takes you deeper. It does. Now, here is the irony. The people most likely to solve the wrong problem are often the people who are very good at solving problems. High capacity people are accustomed to taking responsibility. They see a problem, they act, they find the resource, they create the system, they make it work. That is a strength. But every strength can become a liability when it is used indiscriminately. Imagine someone carrying a heavy backpack. They feel exhausted. So they decide, I need to become stronger. They start exercising. They improve their endurance. They get stronger. But nobody asked the more important question. Why are you carrying that backpack in the first place? Why are you carrying it? That is what happens when capability becomes the default response to every problem. You compensate instead of investigate. You're overwhelmed, but become more organized. You're emotionally exhausted. You become more disciplined. You're uncertain. You gather more information. You're unhappy. You set another goal. You're struggling with boundaries. You learn another communication technique. Sometimes the answer really is a better system. But sometimes the system is helping you carry something you should be questioning. And that distinction matters because you can become incredibly efficient at maintaining a life that is internally misaligned. Yes, there is that likelihood. So how do you stop solving the wrong problem? How do you stop this? Start asking better diagnostic questions. Question 1. What am I actually experiencing? Don't label it too quickly. Instead of saying, I'm lazy, describe the experience. I keep avoiding this task. That gives you something observable. Question 2. What happens immediately before the pattern? What triggers it? Is it a difficult conversation? Is it uncertainty? Is it criticism? Is it a large decision? Is it feeling overwhelmed? This helps you identify what the behavior may be responding to. Question 3. What is this behavior protecting me from? This is a powerful question. Maybe procrastination protects you from evaluation. From people pleasing. People pleasing protects you from rejection. Overworking protects you from feeling inadequate. Overthinking protects you from uncertainty. Avoidance protects you from discomfort. And behavior may be unhelpful. But if you have developed for a reason, understanding that reason gives you leverage. Question 4. What would need to change at the source for this behavior to become unnecessary? Now, you are moving from symptom management to root level change. Because the goal isn't simply to force yourself to behave differently. That's not the goal. The goal is to understand what keeps producing that behavior. That is the goal. This is one of the central principles behind my internal coherence recalibration model. I don't begin by asking, how do we make you perform better? I begin by asking, what is happening inside the system that is producing the current pattern? We look at 5 interconnected dimensions. Values. What genuinely matters to you? We look at identity. What do you believe you are? We look at emotions. What are you experiencing? And what are those emotions communicating? We look at priorities. What deserves your attention right now? We look at behaviors. What are your actions actually reinforcing? Then we look for contradictions. Maybe your values say peace matters, but your behavior continually creates unnecessary pressure. Maybe you value family, but your priorities consistently push family to the margins. Maybe you want growth, but your identity is still organized around avoiding failure. Maybe you want visibility, but your emotional system interprets criticism as danger. That is internal incoherence. And when those contradictions remain unresolved, they create friction. You keep trying to change the behavior, while the internal system keeps producing the same behavior. It's like repeatedly trimming the leaves of a plant while ignoring the roots. You may make it look different temporarily, but the source remains untouched. Recalibration means going to the source. That is what recalibration means, going to the source. Here is a practical shift I want you to make. The next time you encounter a recurring problem, don't immediately ask, how do I fix this? Pause. Ask 3 questions instead. 1. Is this actually the problem, or is it the symptom? That question alone can save you enormous time and energy. 2. What internal conflict could be producing this pattern? Look for competing values, competing priorities, fear versus desire, identity versus ambition, emotion versus expectation. 3. What would alignment look like here? Not perfection, but alignment. What decision would reflect your values? What boundary would reflect your priorities? What response would reflect the person you are becoming? What needs to be released? What needs to be acknowledged? What needs to be decided? This is where real change begins, because you stop trying to force an outcome. You stop and start changing the conditions producing the outcome. Think about a GPS. If you have entered the wrong destination, improving the navigation system would help. You simply arrive at the wrong place faster. The first question isn't, what's the fastest route? The question is this actually where I want to go? That is the difference between optimization and alignment. Let me leave you with this. You don't always need a better strategy. Sometimes you need a better diagnosis. You don't always need more discipline. Sometimes you need to understand the resistance. You don't always need more information. Sometimes you need to clarify what actually matters, and you don't always need to work harder. Sometimes you need to stop carrying what was never yours to carry. This is especially important for high capacity individuals because your ability to solve problems can become a way of avoiding the deeper question. You keep fixing, you keep improving, you keep optimizing, you keep managing, you keep performing. But eventually, you have to stop and ask, why does this problem keep returning? Why? That is where the real work begins. When you identify the root, you can change the system. When the system becomes more coherent, your decisions become clearer. Your emotional responses become more stable. Your priorities become easier to protect. And your behavior becomes easier to sustain. That is what internal coherence recalibration is about. Not helping you become better at managing symptoms. No. Helping you understand the internal system producing them. So the next time you are struggling with something you have tried to fix repeatedly, don't immediately reach for another tool. Don't automatically download another app. Don't create another complicated system. Don't assume you need to try harder. Stop and ask, what if I'm solving the wrong problem? Because that question can completely change the direction of your life. Sometimes the breakthrough isn't finding the right answer. It's finally asking the right question. If this message resonated with you, comment here below with the word diagnose and tell me what recurring problem in your life might actually be a symptom of something deeper. If you are ready to escape overwhelm, restore emotional stability, and develop decision clarity through the internal coherence recalibration model, subscribe to the channel. Because sustainable transformation doesn't begin with doing more. It begins with understanding what actually needs to change.